Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Burn Temple and the Outreach Center, they have this ticket, the $14,000 one. We've requested disclosure multiple times. The messaging initially on our very first reach out to Saskatchewan Health Authority was, well, we don't really give disclosure before the first appearance. And my response had been, well, that's unreasonable.
Do you remember the horrible story of what happened to the Full Gospel Outreach Church in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan? Now, the church was fined a staggering $14,000 in pandemic lockdown fines because the pastors there did not force the congregation to sing with masks covering their faces. Now, at the time, the mayor of Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, Greg Dion, said that he wanted to make an example of the church. He said this in speaking to the CBC, and he said there had to be, quote, consequences for what the church had done. At the time, I was so appalled, I drove out to Prince Albert, Saskatchewan to meet with Pastor Vernon Temple to get his side of the story. And I saw a church that ministers to the downtrodden, the addicted, the poor, and the homeless in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan's inner city, but also in the regions around Prince Albert. They're doing good work for the forgotten people, and they were being punished with these enormous fines. So naturally, we offered the church a lawyer through our civil liberties project, fightthefines.com, to fight those lockdown tickets in court at absolutely no cost to the church. I think they should be taking what little funds and resources they have and devoting those to the good work that they do to help the forgotten people. And naturally, we also got to work digging down into the situation. Now, through access to information, and definitely not through legal disclosure, we have received about 372 pages of internal police communications regarding the Full Gospel Outreach Center. And in reading through these communications, it looks to me like the entire town is run by bullies, and I'm not just talking about Mayor Greg Dion. Look at this here. This is an email from Brent McDonald. Now, he's an inspector with the Prince Albert Police Service. And he says that he's been getting pressure to charge the church. Look at this. As you can imagine, our service is being challenged on responding to the non-compliance demonstrated at the event. Challenged by whom, it's hard to tell because these documents are so heavily redacted. But we do know that Mayor Greg Dion told the CBC that he wanted, quote, consequences for the Full Gospel Outreach Center. We also know that in the past, the mayor and the church have butted heads. The mayor has implied that the church is somehow a magnet for criminal activity based on the people the church ministers to. Then, an email from Dr. Khami Chokani of the Saskatchewan Health Authority reveals that the pressure the cop was talking about is to indeed ticket the church. And the health authority wants it done right away. Look at this. It looks like the pressure is to issue the tickets accordingly. Who is on call to issue? It appears as though the local police are bending to political pressure to lay charges here, which I don't think is how the law should be applied in a free and democratic society. You see, politicians just cannot use the police force as their errand boys for their petty grievances or to deal with people they don't like. It might be a small town, but municipal politicians don't run the show like this. Now, many of these documents are redacted, and we certainly don't expect the local police to hand over policing secrets. But I have a pretty good hunch that those are political spin comments and not policing comments that are being redacted from my eyes here. Now, this church, the Full Gospel Outreach Center, is obviously fighting in a town that is using the police force and the full weight of the government to punish them. So we hired a lawyer named Sarah Miller from JSS Barristers. She's also the lawyer leading the charge to challenge the lockdown in Saskatchewan for us through our opensaskatchewan.com charter challenge. Anyway, Sarah is working very hard for the Full Gospel Outreach Center at no cost to this church to fight that $14,000 ticket in court. And I caught up with Sarah last week for an update on the case. Check it out. Sarah, can you give us an update on the case of Pastor Vern Temple and the Full Gospel Outreach Center, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So Vern Temple and the Outreach Center, they have this ticket, the $14,000 one. We've requested disclosure multiple times. The messaging initially on our very first reach out to Saskatchewan Health Authority was, well, we don't really give disclosure before the first appearance. And my response had been, well, that's unreasonable. But so we've been pushing for that. They've, of course, kept their line. They've stopped responding to any of my correspondence at this point. And our first appearance is only a week away now. So we're really looking at, if the appearance proceeds, we'd be looking at having to adjourn because the Saskatchewan Health Authority has done nothing to pursue this $14,000 file or show any proof that there's any reason to give a ticket like this. But given the very strict lockdowns in Saskatchewan right now, we anticipate that they're just going to adjourn to May 31st. It'll be an automatic adjournment, which means many months more, all of March, all of April, and all of May before we can even really start to get in front of a court and pressure the Saskatchewan Health Authority to do anything in any substantive way. So the lockdown measures are being used to our disadvantage, to Vern's disadvantage. He's got to deal with the overhead of having this huge ticket while he continues to try and support his community. So that's where we're at right now. It's incredibly frustrating. The Saskatchewan Health Authority has not been very helpful or forthcoming with information or disclosure. And now we're looking at probably another few months of that.
By the way, that Dr. Khami Chokani, that's the Chief Medical Officer of Health for Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, and I guarantee you he hasn't missed a day's pay through the pandemic. He's the one who wanted the fines in this case that total $14,000 given to a church that truly supports the least of us. We're going to fight for Full Gospel Outreach because they need all the help they can get in that town of bullies and bigots. $14,000 might not seem like a lot to a bunch of well-paid government bureaucrats like the Chief Medical Officer of Health, but it can be the difference between life and death when every penny that goes into Full Gospel Outreach Center is spent back out the other side helping people whose lives are in jeopardy every single day. If you'd like to help us help Pastor Vernon Temple and his congregation, please donate today at fightthefines.com. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. If you'd like to help us help Pastor Vernon Temple and his congregation at the Full Gospel Outreach Center, and frankly, hundreds of other people across this country who have received these ridiculous and unconstitutional lockdown tickets, please donate today at fightthefines.com.